And first of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our Research Week. This is our first event. And in Research Week, we work with all colleges where trainees get to share their work. And not only that, but faculty and staff get to share their research related work as well. I've seen many of the things that will be presented this week, and I could not be more excited. Um, on Tuesday and Thursday, we will have lightning rounds. On Wednesday, we will have a presidential research series with Dr. Mariana Wetherill and others about food insecurity. And on Friday, of course, we'll have an awards ceremony for the winners of Research Week posters. I love this event every year, and I am really excited that you're able to come to the DE&I panel today. I may use that acronym a few times, and it means diversity, equity, and inclusion. But to welcome you to this panel, it could be a little bit more depressing. In the past year, we have witnessed more hate crimes than even in severe years past. This includes, but unfortunately, is not limited to the death of George Floyd, multiple Asian women very recently, Breonna Taylor, and like I said, unfortunately, many others. And I do think it's fair to say that OU Tulsa and OU as an all campus condemns hate in all forms. That's not something that we stand for here. But sometimes among these tragic deaths, which are really the most important thing to have in the conversation, we start to accidentally deprioritize how diversity, equity, and inclusion relates to our research. And it does remain incredibly important. BIPOC people, Latinx people, Asian people, Native American people, gay people, lesbians, bisexual people, people with disabilities, neurodiverse people, people experiencing poverty or houselessness, and many other minority identifying people who are not even on this list. They sometimes are not as recognized for their strengths as much as these groups should be. And it is imperative in all human subjects research to include people from multiple valuable perspectives. And we will be talking about that today. It can come from lived experiences, working with people who have lived experiences, or reading up as much as you can on the appropriate ways to include diverse people in your research. And I hope that after today, you'll know even more than now about why that is so very important. So with that, we would like to go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Jasmine Willis-Wallace, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the OU Tulsa campus. I would like to begin by introducing some of our panelists that will be sharing their expertise and their knowledge with us in this virtual space. The first person I would like to introduce is Dallas Pettigrew, a Cherokee Nation citizen and holds a degree in criminal justice and social work. His work experiences includes over 16 years working with children and their families, mostly for tribes with roles in Indian child welfare, human services administration, and behavioral health. In 2017, he joined the faculty at OU Tulsa as a clinical assistant professor. In 2019, he helped launch the Center of Tribal Social Work at OU Tulsa. Dallas is involved in workforce development for tribal child welfare program and recruiting Indigenous students into the School of Social Work. He is very involved in working with tribes to develop their own training and workforce development, combining the tribe's expertise with the resources of the university, including new and advanced methods of teaching like simulation. The next person I would like to introduce today is Danielle Smith. She is the clinical research coordinator at the University of Oklahoma Schusterman Diabetes Endocrinology Center. She received her undergraduate degree from Syracuse University and graduate studies at the Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health in molecular biology and biochemistry while working in epigenetics research. Danielle moved to Tampa, Florida, taking a director of laboratory position at Moffitt Cancer Center on the UCF campus, where she collaborated with Merck to develop the HPV vaccine. In addition to Danielle's current position in clinical research, as the clinical research coordinator, she is in OU's School of Community Medicine, Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, and contribute to lived experience from her family about the Greenwood Massacre. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Dr. Sarah Beth Bell to introduce the rest of our panelists.
I would like to introduce Kyung-Ah Kwan. She is an associate professor in the Department of Instructional Leadership and Academic Curriculum at OU Tulsa. She has 9 years of experience as a teacher of young children and a teacher educator in Korea and the United States. She received her doctorate in developmental studies from Purdue University and worked as an associate professor at Georgia State University before coming to our campus. Dr. Kwan has extensive record of scholarly work about classroom quality, teachers' well-being, and parenting, and how each of these impact child development, especially from disadvantaged households, including a study on parental racial socialization and children's racial understanding and attitudes. She served as a chair on a diversity committee at Georgia State University and is committed to promoting diversity and inclusion. She was recently awarded the Research Scholarship Award from the Jean Rainbow College of Education at OU, and it's certainly a pleasure to have you here today. We also have 2 student panelists here today. They both work in the School of Community Medicine. I'd first like to introduce Sydney Wyatt. Sydney is a second-year medical student at the School of Community Medicine. She is from Choctaw, Oklahoma, and she went to her undergraduate at the University of Oklahoma, where she earned her bachelor's degree in biology. She is the outreach chair for her medical class, where she works with student services to encourage prospective students to learn more about and attend our wonderful program. I threw that part in because I do think it's wonderful. She is also a part of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship, where she has created an outreach project to increase lifestyle resources to underserved patients at the Wayman Tisdale Clinic here in Tulsa. Sydney has made increasing diversity in medicine the cornerstone of her current and future career endeavors. And finally, I would like to introduce Brittany Ladd, also a medical student, a third-year medical student at our School of Community Medicine. She's interested in pursuing a career in pediatrics. She comes from a homeschooling background in Oklahoma City, by what she describes as one of the best teachers in the world, her mom. And she graduated high school in 2012, completed an undergraduate degree in biology at Baylor in 2016. While she was in college, she worked extensively with a community clinic that focuses on serving underserved populations. This experience helped solidify her determination to serve those who have barriers to receiving excellent health care. She enjoys volunteering with kids of all ages, mentoring, reading new books, also playing tennis. She hopes to continue to encourage others on the medical journey and share advice about how to balance life and medicine.
Thank you. So let's jump right into our panel. For those of you who are attending today's event, please feel free to drop any questions that you have throughout the panel in the question and answer section that is at the bottom of your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as we can, but I cannot promise you that we will get to them all, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. So our first question goes to all of our panelists. And the first question we want to ask you today is, when you think about diversity in research, what does that mean to you? And we'll start off with Dallas to begin answering that first question for us.
Thank you. For diversity in research, I feel like it means it's more inclusive, especially to the members of the population who are being studied. There's been a long history of Native American people being exploited by scientists over time, and probably not bad people who were doing the exploitation. It was just circumstantial. So it's important that members of diverse populations are present to protect other members of diverse populations from exploitation and other forms of mistreatment.
And Danielle, please share your perspective.
In regards to diversity in research, I have to piggyback off of what Dallas is saying. The exploitation of various cultures, African American, Asian population, Native American population, have not been protected over the decades, actually several decades. And that's what has led to the mistrust in healthcare and present time. And so that's what I think of when I think of what needs to be incorporated in research and in diversity in research.
For that. And Brittany, share with us your perspective on what diversity in research means to you.
Yeah, so for me, it's multifaceted. One, I think having participants who are diverse, whether that's including age, gender, racial, ethnic backgrounds, as well as the researchers, the people in charge who are putting the study together, who are creating the questions so that they can investigate, why do these patients not show up to their appointments? Is it, a common factor? Is that something that we can address and help shed some light on so that people know and are aware of the problems? So I think it's the participants and also the researchers in charge.
And Ki-On, please share your perspective.
Yeah, sure. I think it's very similar to what you all said. Just making sure that our data accurately represent the voices and then the experiences of all participants, including racial, linguistic, and sexual minority groups. And this would involve a thoughtful consideration throughout the research process for carefully choosing collaborators and topic and sampling methods, measures, the data analysis, and interpreting the data. So for example, I had a study on how parental racial socialization and classroom quality plays a role in preschoolers' racial understanding and attitude toward others. The topic in itself directly addresses diversity to some extent, but I also made sure to include the collaborators from each of the racial groups to represent diversity on our team, and to validate and make sense of our data in a culturally sensitive and meaningful way. Also, we made the extra effort to recruit a racial minority group or participant from low-income families to diversify our data, which is not always easy.
Thank you for that. And Sydney.
So again, I will probably be echoing what everybody else has been saying, but I think practically what comes to mind is that the research topics that are being investigated, as well as the participants that are being included, are represented or reflective of the community in which the research project is being performed. I also think, secondly, as what Brittany has said, is that the research team, to the best of its ability, is also a reflection of diversity that is found within the community. And I think it's also important to reiterate that this is not just it's not just limited to ethnic racial groups, but it is also we should also be including those from different gender identities and sexual orientations. And I think by doing all of these things, I think we do increase the probabilities that we are actually addressing the questions that the community wants answered, as well as providing the perspectives that will be necessary to find the solutions for the questions that we're posing in the first place.
Thank you. Great answers here. I want to kind of reiterate a little bit about what we talked about and kind of sum what I heard you all talk a lot about, which representation matters, right? It is important that not only are we limiting ourselves to racial and ethnic groups, like Sydney said, but also the mention that not only are our participants diverse, but also the researchers are diverse. And so I kind of wanted to share that out because I thought that was a highlight moment. Thank you all for your answers, and I will turn it over to Dr. Sarah Beth Bell with our next question.
Yes, such a logical fit to our next question. I am going to ask Dallas Pettigrew, can you share with us your thoughts on increasing diversity amongst researchers across disciplines? And this can be a tough one, you know, how do we, in an unequal system, help get our value of people of different backgrounds as our researchers in these spaces? So Dallas, I'll let you share your expertise on that.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. I first want to say that I was very fortunate to have been recruited as a researcher into a project that studied underage alcohol prevention in the Cherokee Nation not long after I graduated with my graduate degree, because the researchers were very interested in bringing in people from the community that they intended to study to help with a few things, but also to help the local community members like me get access to the sort of standing you get when you publish in the American Journal of Public Health, for example. So it really pushed my career forward by being able to participate as a researcher on this team. And I think that it's important for research teams to include diverse people because of the perspective they bring. And I've heard Sydney has said it and others have said it too, that perspective is key. Diverse people offer insights from their lived experience that can't really be taught in a classroom setting. And it's very valuable because it helps protect people from sometimes just innocent words and phrases that have crept into our regular vocabulary. For example, I've been in many meetings with non-tribal people, and people will say things like, well, we need to get together and have a powwow about that. And that's, no one meant any harm when they said that. And it's sometimes not offensive at all. But to some tribes, a powwow is not just a conference or a gathering or a meeting. It's a very important ceremonial event. And it would be similar to like, let's have a Sunday school about that or something. It's just, it's important that someone is there to speak for the community and protect them from those kinds of things. But also, when you have members of the population on the research team, that can help with buy-in and trust from the population as well. And I think it was Brittany who said it's important to have people there from the very beginning who are from the community because they help design the research in the best way. Because it's important that we are not only sensitive to the words, but also just our actions, the way we enter a community, the way we address people and everything like that. And Only diverse people can help understand diverse people, I think.
I really like that response. There's no way to study diverse populations without an insider perspective. I've experienced this too. I've worked with people who use opioids, and if I did not consult them before starting my study, I don't think I would have gotten anybody to even trust me to come into the lab. And that's just another example of how very important it is for diverse researchers to bring their perspectives to the table about diverse research participants, and then also not limited to that, but their valuable perspectives in general. So I really appreciated hearing that answer.
Thank you, Dallas. I love how you said buy-in and trust, and this can actually shift a little bit into our next question that will go to Danielle Smith, which highlights participation within research. So my question to you, Danielle, is why is diversity within research participation important?
So we in any type of research that you do, and my background, obviously we were presented with my types of background, you need a variation of cross-functional research participation. So we want to remove the negative stereotypes from the subjects. I don't like to use that word, but that's the word I'm going to use, because when you use the word subjects, it sort of like dehumanizes. But that's the only word I can use right now. But I'll just say patients. Okay, we'll just go with patients right now. But you want to remove the negative stereotypes from the patients or the human subjects from the participants. So we need a variation of different patients involved in research. So throughout history, there's been a stigma. I'll use the example with African American, black people, that that their skin, they don't feel the same way, and these type of negative stereotypes have come through in medicine, and they still are today, and they get treated differently, leading to health disparities. And so in the research community, wet labs, or in the health field, you don't see a lot of, actually, you don't really see a lot of Black males in health, in research, wet lab research, or a lot of research in general. You see a few Black females, and so then you get that stereotype of more Asian people are in research, and that's not true. And so you want to just pretty much want to remove that type of stereotype. The next thing you want to just, get a lot more, move forward in progressing, more progressive for the community, for communities. So you will broaden the education, healthcare systems, and employment. So with all those factors, when you increase participation in research and all facets, you will increase education, healthcare, finances, and employment. And so with those type of events happening, it starts at the very basis when they're little, when they see, when little kids see people doing research, different types of people doing research, different areas of research, not just astronomy or engineering, but basic science, clinical research, medical research, all different areas of research, then they think to themselves, okay, well, I can do this. I'm a woman, or I'm a little boy, a Arab person, or a lesbian person, or a gay person, or whatever religion I am, I can do this. So we need all sorts of participation at the lowest level, at the youngest level, to be able to be more progressive. And when you're more progressive at a lower level, it creates a better living community. So
For the sake of time, but can you share one way of removing stereotype, that negative stereotype? Just that quick one way you can do that.
Quick one way. So the study that I was in, that I participated in, the HPV study, it was a tri-national study, and it was focused on men. And what Brittany said, it does work. We were a functional, multi-diverse group. We were in the United States, we were in Brazil, and we were in Mexico. And we had all types of people from ages 12 to literally 97 years old. The people that were on the studies in each country, they weren't 12 because that's child labor laws, but we were the youngest person that worked in our university was 18. They had to be 18. And so the youngest person in Brazil was 16 because they can work that young. The oldest person, I think, was 67, so we had, and these were people working at higher levels. And we had all different types of, sometimes we prayed, some people went to mosque, some people were Jewish. And so these type of people who made decisions at the very beginning, it really did work. We were able to get, and this was called the HIM study, and this was for the HPV vaccine in men. It didn't take long. It only took us 4 years from phase 0 to 3, 4 years. Back then, that's a shorter amount of time. This year has been just wow. So when you have those age groups, cultural, religious, different groups, that really does work. It really, really does work. So the participation from who's working, who actually is participating, we got this done in a matter of time. And then we had a lot of people. I think we had over 100,000 participants. They were willing to participate because of who was involved. So
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we'll shift it over to Dr. Sarah Beth Bell.
Yes, and I wanted to get some perspective from both Sydney and Brittany today about what they perceive as some of the most important long-term consequences if we ignore diversity and inclusion in research. And that could relate to the participants, that could relate to the researchers, that could relate to the research questions. So I'd love to hear both of your perspectives. Sydney, if you'd like to go first.
Wonderful. So when thinking of the long-term consequences of avoiding diversity and inclusion in research, immediately I go to gloom and doom. So we're going to backtrack a little bit. So I'm going to pose this rhetorical question, and it's, what is research? And I think whenever I think of that, research is just honestly having the audacity to ask a question and then having the courage to seek its answer fully. And so Dr. Smith has talked and spoken about some of the intricacies of research, but at its core, it's very simple. It's simply asking the question and then seeking out its answer. So when we do that, I think we can figure out what research has the ability to do, so then we can talk about what it has the ability not to do if we choose to not or choose to avoid diversity in research. So research has the ability to give persons who have been historically voiceless a medium to be heard. It also has the ability to increase equity among the different community members. It has the ability also to inform the uninformed, even those who think they're informed, but unfortunately are still uninformed. And it most importantly has the ability to bring about change. So I think if we ignore diversity in research, we will go down a path in which we blunt these conversations that need to be had, and we blunt the growth or stunt the growth that we need to move forward to have a healthier community, and as well as having a healthier dialogues when discussing change. So, but lastly, and I think really most importantly, which is what I really want to get across, is that if we are complicit in ignoring diversity and inclusion efforts, we're being complicit in perpetuating the status quo, which I think is just very ironic because research in and of itself is designed to do the exact opposite. It is designed to answer these questions that the community wants to be answered and then seek out answers on how to move forward. So if we don't do these things, we will in and of itself be perpetuating the same thing, which is useless for everybody. And in some ways, I think it's quite inhumane.
Love that. So I'll tack on just a little bit here. Just some of the long-term consequences, just in not including people in this, research that is just crucial to their livelihood. For one, you can have just, if you're not looking or evaluating a certain population or group in a population, you're ignoring the problems that that group could be facing and therefore not solving them. There was a book I read when I was a part of a summer internship here at SCM. It is called An American Sickness. And it talked about how like the sickest part of our population costs or creates the most costs in our healthcare system. So if you're ignoring a certain group for so long, this population can potentially get sicker and, one, you want to solve their health problems, and two, you want to have a system that is able to bear the burden of the sicknesses or illnesses of the population. And so in ignoring a group, you're creating more health problems and you're creating more costs in the long run. So that's one thing. And then, it's just, you have to, if you're not studying that group, you can't apply your results. If you think about, there was a study well known to people in the medical community of how if you combine two drugs for African Americans with hypertension, it was shown to be more effective in them. And if those researchers hadn't studied that and looked specifically at this population who is very well known to suffer from hypertension in our community, they wouldn't have discovered that, and we wouldn't be switching our African American patients to certain antihypertensive drugs. But those researchers included that. And so now we're able to change, how we provide healthcare to certain people in our patient populations, which is amazing and what research is supposed to be doing, like Sydney said. So very dire consequences if we don't pay attention to everyone in our population.
That is such a strong point. It does remind me of ideally long ago when so many experiments were done on white college men. Now many experiments are done on Western, mostly white college students, hopefully of all genders, but we do not get a strong perspective. A lot of times we aren't even getting perspectives of people who aren't in college. And this is just so important. It's important to be able to intentionally recruit people from different populations to be in your study if they so choose. So very well said, Brittany.
So I want to shift. I'm not even going to follow up because you all summed it up so well. But I want to take this conversation into talking a little bit about the importance of community engagement, because sometimes that is where we get a lot of our participants within our communities, right? So let's shift into talking a little bit about that and how community engagement plays a role in this whole world of research. So my question goes to Keong Ah, And the question is, how do you know the right level of community engagement? And what is a good starting point for researchers who want to involve the community?
Okay, thank you. Well, that is very good question, but very difficult questions to answer. I'm not an expert for sure. I still have a struggle, and I'm still taking a baby step for that. But I just wanted to share how I began to understand the community engaged research. And I learned about this concept of community engaged research from one of my colleagues, Alicia Salvatore, the former faculty member in public health at OU Tulsa, while working on the interdisciplinary research project called the Happy Teacher Project on early childhood teachers' well-being. I definitely see this as a huge benefit of working with the colleagues from different fields and learning new perspectives. So in the past, I just choose whatever question I'm curious about, whatever it seems hot or fundable for research. But fundable for research. But I just wrote, and then after the data collection and data analysis, I just wrote a paper and made a presentation at the national research conferences and really share the findings with the community. Maybe in part because peer-reviewed publications and national conference presentations are more valued for annual faculty evaluation and tenure promotion review. So we probably should revisit the process of the tenure promotion review in that regard. Anyway, in the past, my research is more about me, myself, and about my own research interests. But Alicia helped me to realize how much I missed in the narrow-minded research framework. So after talking with her, I began to see what is needed for the community I work with, specifically early childhood teachers in my case. And now I begin to view participants as a more of the valued partners, not merely as a research subject. I actively seek out and talk to the community members for their input throughout the process. And I also learned that it is not a choice to share my research findings with the participants and the community. It should be the integral part of any research I have done. So to me now, good research is the one that makes a difference in participant and the community, even if it is a small, really tiny thing.
I was writing stuff down, and I really liked how you said, and I'm going to summarize, research partners rather than research subjects. Can you just, for a brief second, elaborate just a little bit on how you shift your mindset to think along those lines when you are doing your research?
So I think in the past, I think I just wanted to collect data from them. I just need the data from them. But I really did not see them as really valued partners and participants who would have a great input for this process and for my research question and then the findings. I probably disregard that part. I probably didn't even realize how important that is. So now I really act, because this is my process. It should be rigorous. I should be separated from them to be objective as possible. You know what I mean? But I realized that is wrong.
Thank you
So
for
that's a big realization for me.
Thank you for elaborating on that.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that perspective. I think my hairs on my arms rose just a little bit longer when you said research partners rather than research subjects. Dr. Sarah Bell, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, I would like to ask an all panelist question, and then we should have time for a couple of questions from the audience. My question to all of you is, what advice would you give to researchers when it comes to achieving diversity within your research? So this is kind of more of an applied question. I'd like to talk with Danielle Smith first.
Thank you, Sarah. So for me, it's a little bit strenuous. So a little bit different. I would give people advice. I gave someone some advice yesterday. And this is overall advice, not just for research, just for anything, any kind of career. If you cannot find a position that suits you, create your own. And so even if you're in a position that you love, like you're in a position right now that you love, but you want to expand it and there's no more room for expansion, create some expansion for yourself. So that's the advice that I'm going to give to researchers or just people in general. But as far as research and diversity, when I started out a long time ago in research, when I got to Syracuse, I was probably the only brown person in my class, in all my classes. And I never felt any way. I really never felt any sort of way about that. And I just did what I did. I went to class. I went on about my business. When I got to Johns Hopkins, it was the same thing. Not in the city, but in my class. And so it changed when I got to Florida at Moffitt, when I worked with the HPV group. And so that was refreshing to me because I thought to myself, wow, that things really do change. And that's the advice that I will give to anyone going into research. Research is ever changing and it will constantly change. It's just like with anything in life, research will always change. And if something is not the way you like it, you can always make it change for yourself and for the betterment and progression of the field.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. I will go ahead and hear the perspective from Kyung-ga.
Yeah, sure. So you can achieve diversity within your research in a variety of ways, but I would say at least 3 ways. We talk a lot about how much perspective matters today. In view of that, actively seek out and collaborate with and include researchers who are not only from other racial and cultural groups, but also from other disciplines. That will help you deepen and broaden the topic you study. And then secondly, treat your research participant with respect and build relationship with them. And you'll be surprised how much you will learn from them actually. And thirdly, make sure to share your findings with your participant before you publish to get their input, like a member chat. Ask them if you interpret the findings correctly to ensure their voice is heard and validated. And make sure to present and share your findings in an easy to understand format and manner without many jargons. So some of the things I have done very successfully is that I create this 1-page handout with very few words, with lots of infographics, or a very short research brief. I found that this is a very effective strategies, and then I share them on the social media to reach a wide range of diverse audience. So those are few tips I can share.
Wow, I love that. I completely agree. The point of science is to disseminate that knowledge, and for that to occur, it needs to be understandable to everyone. And something that is understandable to a community member may be also quite understandable to academic communities. I think it's all about writing in a way where anybody can understand what you're talking about. Try to do this more in some of my articles, so I really couldn't agree more. And now I will send the question over to Sydney.
So, my advice to any researchers who want to include diversity in their research is firstly, this is slightly off topic, but I'll bring it back to the point, is I'm a very big sports fan. Um, and I am a very big sports brand person, so I follow all of the brands, and one of the major brands is Nike. And Nike's slogan has, and probably hopefully will be, is just do it. And what I mean by that is I know that diversity in research is a big topic. It can be very overwhelming, but I think like with anything in life, you just have to start and you just have to continue to ask questions. And that may be asking a fellow researcher who may come from a different background than you. And that may be asking fellow citizens within the community some of the questions you're posing, because most people just want to have a conversation. So I think that would be my first advice. And I think it'll take you a long way. I know it's taken me a long way by just simply asking questions and being genuinely interested and trying to be empathetic. It's okay to be on the struggle bus, is what I call it, as long as we're moving forward. And as long as you are being genuine, that comes across in conversation. That comes across whenever you're writing your research. And most people know that you are doing it for the benefit of like the greater good. So, like Nike, I would just say, just do it.
Fabulous answer. You know, it gets at the idea to me that you might not get it right. I think people are scared to try because they're so nervous they're going to mess it up in some way. But the biggest way you can mess it up is by not doing it at all, in my opinion. I would like to send this question over to Dallas next.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I've been typing an answer into the question and answer part and got a bit distracted by that because the question I thought was really important. Once you've recruited diverse people onto your research team, how do you keep them on your research team and how do you keep them involved and let their contributions actually be used? And so I was explaining that the research team that recruited me in for the very first time, the scientists, the lead scientists, the PIs were very interested in making sure that I was always at all the meetings. Even if it wasn't necessarily the part of the research that I was doing, they wanted me to be there always. And they have even just rescheduled meetings because I wasn't available. So the entire team of several people had to reschedule their lives around me, maybe the person with the least experience and the least expertise on the entire team, and just being treated like I have that sort of value and worth to the research team keeps me involved. It gives me more buy-in, makes me want to be present always and give my full attention to this project. And it has kept me going. I joined the project in 2012. It officially ended in 2017. I'm still involved. I present on this topic every single year at a national conference, and we're looking at replicating this research in a community in Texas, maybe later this fall. And it's because those scientists were very insistent on keeping me involved.
Wow, that is so valuable. I do agree that recruitment of people who may have diverse identities, and not just by looking at them, but all types of identities, intentional recruitment is a big part of this pipeline. I know one thing we're concerned about in the sciences is a lot of sexual orientation minorities do actually more undergraduate research than their straight counterparts, but things start to drop off after that. And a lot of that is a recruitment issue. I see that here at OU about ways we do have room for growth to recruiting students who have more diverse experiences. And I think that's something that every single one of us is on board with. So that's such a valuable experience to share. And now I will send this question over to Brittany.
So a couple of thoughts come to my mind. Before, I believe before Bedlam was started here at SCM, um, I want to say it may have been like the weekend before it started, but there was an article in a local Tulsa newspaper about, claiming that, oh, you had figured out the community's problems and they were just going to start this clinic and, just solve it for everyone. And so at that moment, the leadership of OU who were over starting that clinic decided, okay, let's actually ask the community, like, what is it that they need? So I think that's great to do on the front end instead of, afterwards, but they figured that out and went to work. So I think it's important to not assume that you know the community's problems, but actually ask them, because you may be solving a clinical or research question that may not be affecting people in that community at all. So definitely survey your population. I think it's important for researchers to just have that burden on yourself that if you walk into a room and it's your research team, if they all look like you should say, hey guys, like everyone looks like me. This isn't good. I'm not comfortable with this. We need some more diverse voices in this room, because we don't represent the population right now where we are. And definitely just ask for help. There are so many people who are willing to help. And as long as you are actively showing that you're trying to understand, and not just, teach me everything you know about your life and your experiences, but actually seeking out information first. And then when you get stuck, asking someone like, hey, like, do you mind if I bounce this idea off you? This is what I'm thinking. Is this offensive? Is this a good idea? What are your thoughts on that? Even if they aren't on your team, having that input from someone who has a diverse, background of experiences could do nothing but benefit you. So definitely seek out opinions. Don't get stuck. Be encouraged. There's so many people that are willing to help.
Thank you, Brittany, and to all of our panelists that answered that question. I would taken something down, like I always do, but one of the things that struck core with me was that just do it. I'm a sports person too, so just do it. It's really about just getting out there and doing it. The intentional recruitment piece that we talked a little bit about, and also this question that I believe Brittany just said, what is the need? Sometimes we think we know what the need is, but essentially we haven't asked anybody what the need is, so we're just guessing what the need is. So I appreciated that you addressed that piece of the research and shared out that advice. At this time, if there are any additional questions that you'd like to drop into the Q&A, we do have a short amount of time, but the beauty of webinars is that you can answer some of the questions within the Q&A as the panel is happening. So we did have some questions that talked a little bit about the community engagement piece, and the idea of suggesting that community engaged or community-based participation in research is best. And that question, we kind of started to answer that question in the question that we asked in our panel, but with our last minute or so left, is there anything else anybody would like to say about community engaged research? And if there's not, that is totally fine. And then we also had a question that our panel actually brought into the discussion that was asked. So I greatly appreciate Dallas kind of looking in that space and bringing that question to the forefront of the panel during our last question. But that question was centered around what was it around? Can you give us any advice that can keep diverse people involved in research? So Dallas brought that question into the space by sharing an example of his own experiences. We have about a minute left. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so yes, so I agree with Dallas. Um, being respectful of when you recruit someone to come in, or hire someone, recruit them to come in as a researcher, regardless of what level they are, showing them respect um, for their position is the best way to keep them. Respect is the best way to keep your personnel, your staff, your faculty. And the lack of respect will quickly get them out the door. And I like the fact that Dallas's team has always invited them to meetings. I've been in positions where I've been at all levels and I was not invited to meetings, but all of a sudden had projects that I knew nothing about. And that is really ta-das are not the best ta-das in the world. So, you know, that is the best way, is to respect your researchers and to let them in on the research that they're actually doing, to and allow them to give input, because it may be something that there may be something within the research that may not be may not relate to, or may not be quite right with the research, that you may not want to go forward with,
Thank you.
or
Thanks for that
shouldn't go forward
perspective.
with it. You shouldn't go forward with it. There may be something wrong with that research that could harm the patient. So, you just gotta respect that researcher to keep them.
Thank you.
Could
And
I add-
Dallas, yeah, you could briefly expand on that. That would be great.
I just wanted to encourage anyone who's going to mentor community members or diverse people onto a research team when they've not been a part of one in the past, to be always thoughtful about the language you use when you're in those meetings, and to break things down into terms that sort of everyday citizens can understand well, because we tend to break off into clinical speech or scientific speech, and that can exclude people and make them feel less included or less valuable. So that was an important part of my experience as well.
I
Yeah.
love that.
I had a person that would always say, just kiss. And they would say, use the KISS method.
Yes. Yes, which is keep it simple, stupid. I try to use that too. Well, you guys, this has been a wonderful panel. I hope that everyone is able to attend most of the rest of Research Week with our lightning rounds on Tuesday and Thursday, our presidential research series on Wednesday, and our award ceremony for Research Forum on Friday. Some all-campus emails have been going around with the links to RSVP for that. And I'm just so delighted that you've been here, because your presence tells me that this is something that you value as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and hop off of here, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow.